you growing up in Britain in the 1970s, getting ready to either start or leave high school? What were you doing, wearing, and how did you communicate with friends and family? Well, that's what this video is all about. What it was like to be a teenager in Britain in the 1970s. So, let's get on with it. And as part of our British social history, we cannot forget what it was like to be teens. We were told by our elders that you haven't got a clue, you've never had it so good, and I don't understand kids like you today. Well, we wore clothes that looked the part, didn't we? Whether they were designer or not. Mostly not, but as long as we thought we looked like the pop stars that set the fashion with their groovy flares and those high shoes, we felt fine. We walked through those streets meeting our friends that we'd arranged to, and we stuck to the plan. Even though our clothes were uncomfortable, flares blowing in the wind, and we could hardly walk in those platform shoes, we didn't care. We had no mobile phones or text messaging to confirm that you were on your way, so you had to be on time, otherwise they'd just go without you. More importantly, you could not use a text message to say that you were going to be late, or to even cancel. Now, how many people have had a text message to say that people aren't going to make it without having the courtesy to actually give you a call? That's annoying. The text messaging was nothing more than a note passed around the classroom, handed on a scrap of paper, sometimes being intercepted by the teacher, or even a phone call at the telephone box, as long as you had 2p in change. We remembered the telephone numbers back then by heart because we had to physically dial them. And I'll bet many of you can remember telephone numbers from your youth, just like your first registration plate on your first car. I bet you're saying it out loud now, aren't you? Now, I've still got one of those old rotary dial phones, but there's no redial button on them, so if you dial the number and it's engaged, you've got to dial that number all over again. We took a ball to the park and played in backyards when we were visiting friends after school, and their parents would greet you with a soft drink, and they made sure that you were back home in time. Your parents couldn't contact you, but they knew that you were safe. They knew exactly where you were, and they knew exactly what you were up to, and we never understood why, because we didn't have the sense to realise that neighbours talk to each other. But you know what? There was a confidence in the teenager back in the 70s. We had a more face-to-face communication and stricter rules, whether at home or at school. We knew where we stood, and we respected the consequences of our behaviours. There was a big freedom of being away from problems that faced the world. Without iPads or tablets, the news and events were just a world away. And social media was just something like we'd do by walking into the neighbourhood, or maybe hearing your mum and dad reading news items out of the newspaper to each other, then asking the other if they wanted to use the paper. Well, what was the point? They'd already read each other the news and the whole household had heard it anyway. They were all caught up. Yeah, there is bullying today, which is despicable. But obviously there was no Facebook intimidation, or having online friends and people saying they've got more than you, or even publishing pictures of wonderful holidays depicting people of their wealth. Everything was at face value, and what we did was more important than what we had, or what we didn't have. And let's face it, many of us didn't have much. We knew the show-offs and we ignored them. After all, when we got home, we could forget them. There was no internet that we could open applications and be tempted to look at pages of those we just didn't want to see. So we weren't concerned about them. Home was home, with family and the odd visitor, and the world out there stayed out there without creeping onto our phones or our tablets on pop-ups. Riding bikes, hanging around the street, or just being outside was how we spent our leisure time, getting fresh air and enjoying just being a teenager with a lack of responsibilities that came with it. It was a time when big news was shocking and not just an everyday and almost forgettable event. Shootings, muggings, robberies, they were all what we saw on TV cop shows, and not in our streets. But when there was such an item, it was talked about for days because it was just so rare. Homework without calculators, searching for information without computers. The school library and our textbooks was how we sourced the items we had to study. Mind you, we did have those scary public information films on TV that told us to learn to swim, not talk to strangers, and keep away from train lines and electricity pylons. They were pretty frightening, to be honest. You know, kids getting bzzed, you know, but they did the trick. And there was always that deep voice, that narration, that really, really did scare you. I still have nightmares about them today. We hung around the local cafe, or maybe an arcade gaming machine, such as pinball, and we just got introduced to those Space Invader games and Pac-Mans where you had to put 10 pence in. And those 10 pences, if we got really clever, would last us for absolute hours, to the point where the place had just closed down. And we also used to sneak into those arcades with those electromechanical fruit machines. They were normally Bell fruit, and all you'd win is 50 pence, and they were paid in tokens, even though we were not allowed to gamble, being underage. But all the chippies had them, didn't they, really? If you won, you got your supper. If you lost, you daren't go home. We used to have a place near us called Billy's Bingo, and he only ever threw us out when we won, which wasn't very often. But going back to those cafes, I can remember walking down the street and it was freezing cold, and all you could smell was that frying bacon, you know, that fat. Oh, and it really tempted you in. Then you got a cup of tea, one of those smoked glass cups and saucers, remember? Then you look on, and there's always be a tomato-shaped ketchup squeezer and a bottle of brown sauce, always with little bits all sort of coming down there and dried off. Very appetising. And not to forget those old gossiping women wondering what we were doing there. Sort of saying, have they not got a home to go to? How about just having enough money to buy a single, that 45 record? You couldn't wait to get it home and play. And you tested out the B-side. And some of them were pretty good. But I noticed later on they got a bit cheeky. They started releasing B-sides with the instrumental version. That was crafty. What was the first record you ever bought, eh? I bet you daren't tell. Don't worry, I'm going to admit it. The first single I bought was My Cuckoo by Elvin Stardust. Mind you, my first album was better. It was in 1981, Dare by the Human League. Oh, I've still got that album today. We borrowed records from each other and took care of them. And we took them to school discos and probably wrote our names on the paper sleeves on the index number. But we'd borrow records off people so we could record them on cassette. Well, I did. Now, the new pop charts were always updated on a Tuesday, and we had to find out what that number one in the charts were. So near a radio, we had to be. A little tiny, tinny transistor radio. It was good enough to listen to as we crowded in the playground, and hearing the latest chart rundown and hearing the jingle, Britain's number one. Not forgetting sitting around the TV on a Thursday to watch Top of the Pops, and hearing your parents saying, "It's all rubbish today." But they still listen to those songs on the radio. In fact, there were songs that we probably hated back in the 70s that we quite like now. I'm sure there are. We entered competitions on Saturday morning TV shows that seemed to be on for hours. We had Tiswas, Swap Shop and Why Don't You? Watching adults throwing buckets of water over each other and the other ones making toys out of washing up liquid bottles. I wonder if anybody ever joined in with that stuff. The making up, that is, not the throwing water over each other. I'm sure we all did that. What about respect? Well, it was drilled into us, but we did learn, didn't we? We called older people by Mr. or Mrs. and accepted a telling off from neighbours and hoping that they weren't going to tell our parents. They always did. Everyone in the area knew your family and did look out for you. Even though we thought they were an interfering old busybody, they did care. You started meeting dates and romance was in the air, sometimes waiting for the telephone to ring. So that meant you couldn't go out. That's for those who had one. Our first home line was well into the 1980s. Yeah. So I remember this, you pick up the receiver to check the dial tone just to make sure that the phone was working whilst waiting for that call. Or begging your chatty sister to get off the phone in case someone was going to call you. You didn't want the phone to be engaged for them. They might not try again. And just the thought of a telephone number. Many of us rang this number back in the day. 16 or 160. I won't keep you guessing any longer. It was dial-a-disc. Remember calling that? Hearing the latest chart hits? Now the service ran from 1966 to 1991 and gave you 4 minutes of music on a loop play for 2p per minute. That's a bit different, isn't it, from downloading or accessing the tunes on the web today. I mean, you could just get anything. Just say the word, Alexa, she'll play it. All we had was a telephone call of 4 minutes. And then you couldn't choose what record you wanted to hear. Hey, Saturday jobs. Do they exist anymore? Many of us would get a Saturday job in a local shop or something similar for a bit of pocket money. Not only did it give us confidence and paid for us to get some independence and freedom, but it was a great way for us to advance ourselves in the adult world. I wonder how many people ended up with jobs in these places after leaving school, or even a part-time job when starting further education. I can still remember explaining new money to elderly customers even in the late 1970s. We were paid cash in hand. I expect that hardly happens today. Housework was shared, and you had to do your bit. And many of us were ironing our own clothes, because our clothes are far too precious for our parents to ruin, because we didn't think they could iron properly, did we? We had the chore of bringing in the coal or taking it in turns to light the coal fire or doing the washing up, and sometimes arguing whose turn it was. And I noticed that the younger you were in the family, the more often you lost and you got stuck with those jobs. But there was a community spirit, a family trust. There was a neighbourhood support system, confidence in society. Now, whether that was us being teenagers and being naive, I'm not sure. But we did feel safer and we lived in simpler times. Maybe. And even though we went through a trying decade of strikes, electricity blackouts and 3-day weeks, we seemed to just take it in our strides. Now our parents adapted and made do, which gave us the impression that we were still lucky and had a fortune compared to what others had. No matter how hard up we were, we survived on precious little at times. But I have said so many times, if I had a time machine, trust me, I would give you all a lift. I really would. Now, what era would you like to go back to? Let's pretend, eh? Now, I'd like to go back to the 60s. Those smart clothes those kids wore, those great bands that we all remember, but they were just starting out. So it would have cost pennies to see those playing live. Jukeboxes and milk bars and jobs aplenty. What an era. And what decade would you never want to see again, eh? It would have to be the 90s. Acid house music, terrible political choices, microwave meals ready to be launched. No thanks. Not forgetting gadgets that were completely non-compatible. They were all the rage. Then a couple of months, totally unusable. Well, there are more items like this on my channel, so if you want to check them out, please do. And I'm working on another one at the moment, and it's about what kids got up to be naughty in the 1970s. And a few people have already given me some great ideas. But if you wanted to add yours, please do. Please comment. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. My name is Mickey Bavington, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.